Hello, everyone. It is Laurie and Jennie of AstroPath, and we're here today to talk about Libra season. The sun enters Libra on the 22nd of September and leaves Libra to go into Scorpio on the 23rd of October. So this is the period of time that we're going to be talking about. And before we jump into a big conversation about that, let me just say, if you have not subscribed to our channel, please do that now and share this, comment, like it, all those things so that other people can actually find us here on YouTube or wherever you're watching this. Okay, now, Jennie, do we want to immediately share that chart of the ingress or?
Well, let's talk a tad about Libra, because
Okay.
we are Libra season. Libra is a air sign, and it is a cardinal air sign, which means that we're at the beginning of a brand new season, right?
Yes.
It's the fall equinox
Right.
in the northern hemisphere and going into spring in the southern. So we're at a big shift. That's what cardinal signs always indicate.
Yeah.
And there's like quite a bit of air going on this month. Like it is air all the way in a lot of ways this month. So we'll be talking a lot about that. But what do you think of with Libra? What are your favorite keywords, Laurie?
Oh, interesting. Balance, of course. You know, one of the things about Libra that I always just think is so interesting is people tend to think about Libra as, you know, people think about the balance and they think about relationship and everything's all sweet and copacetic, and yet Libra's a cardinal sign. It's a very, very powerful sign, and it often doesn't look that way. Libra there's this tendency to try to make things look good. You know, one of the things I think about with Libra, it's kind of funny, is, you know, you think about Libra stepping into a room where there's an argument going on, and Libra's going to immediately fall into that diplomatic role of settling things down. However, once they've got things settled down, their job is done and they'll go elsewhere. If they come back into the room an hour later and things are still settled down, they're going to throw a little bomb into the room so that there's some upheaval, so that they have a job again. You know, there's just this requirement of Libra to have something to work with, to do that balance. And you were talking, what was it you said earlier about the balance and the scales? That I just loved that image it created in my mind.
Yeah, I was talking about, well, we all know that the scales is the kind of picture of Libra, or probably most of you know that. But if you think about it, that's just a snapshot in time, like of balance. But to actually have balance is this constant effort to keep both sides balanced, because what does life do with us? Like we're living our lives and all of a sudden, boom, here's this. And now your scales are out of balance. And so now you have to do a lot of work to either kind of back off in the thing that weighed it down, or add more to the other side, or some way of finding balance. So it really is a cardinal sign, because it has to take action. It has to do so much work in order to stay in that balanced state. It's not a passive state. And I think that's the mistake that people make. And it certainly has the reputation for being dependent and indecisive and those things. And I think that can certainly come about because Libra can see all sides of an issue, and it may not know where the person itself is living in between those issues. So that's kind of the struggle. But certainly that's what makes it so active, I think. I mean, you think of like a seesaw and, you know, or running from one side to the other that you'd have to do to keep it balanced.
Right. There's gotta be, there's gotta be some conflict or some shifting in order to do the work of that balancing. Yeah, Libra's a fascinating sign. It's not all sweet and nice like people tend to think about it.
No. And you know, I mean, the air part of it too is really important, right?
Yes,
like just it definitely refers to the cerebral realm, like talking and thinking and all of those like things we do from the neck up. And hopefully listening. That's the one we forget about in our society a lot, but that is a very important piece of air signs as well, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without it, then the balance is totally off. I think that that whole idea of, oh dear, I grasped a thought, and I thought that if I just started talking, it would stay with me, but I think it slipped out. Oh, well, if it comes back, I'll let you know.
It'll pop back in.
Forgive me, everybody. I'm
Oh.
still dealing with a little bit of COVID brain.
I'm glad you've, mostly gotten over it. 'Cause it
Yeah,
sucks.
it sucks. It
Yeah.
does.
So I mean, maybe some other things to think about. Libra, it's ruled by Venus. So that kind of brings in this
Right.
idea of beauty and balance and aesthetics and that kind of thing. And I think that Venus also rules Taurus, but in Libra, Venus is very concerned with social balance.
Yes.
And I think about Lady Justice as having those scales. So that's really what we're talking about. I also really like to think about interdependence, the idea that we are connected. There's a balance of being independent, and then you don't really want to get into dependency, right? So there's this balance of like having to do that. And the opposite end of it really is interdependence, and how all of our systems in nature and amongst humans are interwoven. And you can't, if you pull something over here, then something over here changes. And that's something I think it's hard for us humans to really get it, to really grasp that concept, but it's fundamentally true. So
I think the fact that it is an air sign and it is a Venus ruled sign, I think that's a really important to think about the difference between the two Venus ruled signs. You know, Taurus is so much, it's an earth sign. So it's about the sensuality of beauty. And in Libra, it's the intellect. It's more aesthetic beauty. It's also, there's the pleasure. Libra is always trying to create that balance between people, that understanding, that interdependence, but it comes from an intellectual place. It doesn't come from, when I think about people with a real strong Libra, they can appear, they know how to settle things. They know how to settle ruffled feathers, but it doesn't come from a heart place. It comes from an intellectual place. It comes from an intellectual understanding. People talk about Libra a lot with relationship, because Libra can do so much to create relationship, but that what is being done is coming from a place of intellectual understanding, not from a heart place or a earth place. It's a very different, it's very different there.
I think what you're bringing up for me as you're talking about this is that the Libra component is the yang version of Venus. It's the more masculine of Venus. So it's the output of energy, which might be verbal energy, or, it's really, that's mostly what I think about, conversation. But it's more concerned about that. Whereas the Taurus version is the receptive yin version. And so it's really interesting to me how the planets have both those yin and yang components. That's something I've been thinking about. So that's good.
All right.
Gosh, we could talk more, but we probably should move on, right?
We probably should move on. Yeah, we could keep talking about Libra, but it is, it's a very powerful sign. It's, I think of, people don't realize how strong Libra is. Sort of like, I say that a lot with Cancer as well. The cardinal signs, sometimes we don't really realize how strong they are.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, one of the archetypes for Libra is the judge. And that is unfortunately and fortunately in some ways the strongest component of the government at this point. And so if you want to think about not underestimating that is a way to understand it, because it's a very powerful piece. And whatever your viewpoints are, I don't think you can deny the power of the judge in our society.
Judicial system. Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. Well, let's look at the chart and then talk about the general themes, and then we'll launch into the more personalized parts.
Yeah.
But here's the chart for the month. This is the moment of ingress. So sun, the fancy way of saying the sun moved into Libra. And there it is. And there's a few different things we want to talk about this chart. I guess the first thing I see is that the day the sun moves into Libra, it's also right next to Mercury.
Yep. And so Mercury is retrograde. So yeah, the day after the sun moves into Libra, they conjunct. So that's the midpoint of the Mercury retrograde.
That's
time.
right.
Right.
That inferior conjunction. So yeah, that's great. Also, I think you can see probably right away, you can see the other air signs. And here we have Saturn in Aquarius, we have Mars in Gemini. So we're gonna be talking about those air.
We'll be talking about that.
The whole air thing. The other thing, thanks for drawing that in. Lovely.
Yes, we will be talking as we go. One of the themes that's going on this month is this trine, this grand trine that's formed throughout the the season in air. So that is a real free flow of intellectual conversation, for good or for roughness, or however it plays out.
Yeah.
But it is a free flow. There's a lot of conversation going on, a lot of intellectual gymnastics going on throughout the month.
That's right. And I mean, that's such a major theme that I think we're really looking at this month as a major opportunity to have those conversations, to take action on your conversations, to have something very dynamic and active come out of your viewpoint, basically, and into your relationships.
Yeah. You're not going to want to keep your mouth shut this month. Well,
I know. Yeah. And you're right. For good or for ill. I mean, this is how you choose to use the energy. Though we also have Jupiter in Aries, which is going to be opposing that Libra for the whole month. So that's also a theme. I think that really brings in this idea of autonomy, of expanding through the self in order to find new and better ways to cooperate in your relationships. That's how the two work together.
Yeah, and I think it really shines a light on the need to take action with these ideas that are flowing through you. This internal conversation, the external conversations. This really kind of I feel like it's a directive to take action.
That's right. I mean, even the way you drew it, Laurie, it's great, because what you folks can see is that you have this stable trine of energy, and then you've got Jupiter allows you to break up that trine. So that's where it's kind of like, in order to get out of your head, you've got to go out and do the action, have the conversation, and then take action based on that collaborative conversation.
Yeah. So. And oppositions are always, it's the illumination of something. You see something. So you're living in that kind of intellectual flow. You've got this conversation going on. Well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? It's and there's the illumination of the opposition kind of shows you, okay, there, so pay attention. Pay attention to what voice is telling you what action to take along the lines of this intellectual process that's going on. I want to mention, and I think this is an okay time to bring it in, just the fact that we do not have an exact square between Uranus and Saturn this year. That happened all through 2021. However, we are so close right now. So that is, to me, that square between Saturn and Uranus is so much the backdrop of this, because it's through September, October, right during the midterm elections, that this real major stress in the culture is. It's the backdrop of this conversation. It's the backdrop of, what are you going to do? What action are you going to take for your own thoughts and beliefs, to, even if it's a tiny action, to move things forward?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's what's interesting about this month is there isn't, tons and tons of super stressful aspects. There's very few, actually, and they come at the end of the month, but this is kind of tucked away in the background. And since Saturn is a major player in this trine throughout the month, it's there. And it's sort of like this month is playing out as, this is your opportunity to put your voice into action and use your voice, because the trine presents a wonderful opportunity. But you have to take it. You can't just sit with it. You have to do something about it. So that's really what we're looking at. other themes of the month, we still have Mercury retrograde. It's just about in this picture we're looking at here, it's going to go back into Virgo. So we're going to have some Virgo energy in the beginning of the month, which is kind of back to that minutia and implementation and your, analysis, like those kinds of themes are still present at the beginning of the month. But then it quickly moves into the air theme.
Yeah. On October 2nd, it goes direct.
Oh,
So
that's
that
right. Yeah.
will be that'll be a shifting point there. And then on October 10th, it goes back into Libra.
Yeah. So you'll have that window, that week that you're talking about there, Laurie, October 2nd to the 10th of it's stationing, of being in Virgo and then stationing, and it's going to be opposed Neptune, which brings in kind of it's not going to get any clarity right away. It's going to have to clear out of Neptune's fog to get clarity. But it's a nice time for more imaginative thinking, right? More beyond boundaries and that kind of stuff. But any other themes? What do you think?
Well, we do have the, at the end of the month, we've got to talk about the end of the month, or the end of the Libra season, rather. We've got on October 19th, the Sun squares Pluto. On October 22nd, or rather the 20th, Venus squares Pluto. And that's the most stressful period of all of this. Let me make all of these go away and just look at that. So the Sun and Mercury will be squaring Pluto.
Yeah. Well, there's that. And that's at the very end of the month. I mean, our kind of read on this is that the first few weeks, there's a lot of those air trines and a more free flow of energy. And then we get to the last week and we're starting to think about Scorpio season. We get Pluto squaring the Sun, we get Pluto squaring Venus, then they join. And then just the day after that, they go into Scorpio. So it's kind of like this. It's the, heads up, we're moving into a lot deeper layers. So that's why, now is the time to really be in that more cerebral zone, because once we get into Scorpio season, things are going to get more conflicted and intense is very likely. That's what Scorpio does. But also we have the Uranus Saturn squares in fixed signs. So we're moving back into that fixed sign stress zone. So really this is a golden opportunity to take advantage of the free flow of communicative energy.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely, I like how you said that. It's very clear that, those squares to Pluto it's in preparation for Scorpio season, for going into that depth. And at that point, we'll be going into eclipse season and getting right up against, in the US here, the election process. So, we know things are getting gnarly.
Yeah, that's a good word, gnarly.
It's going to get very gnarly. Scorpio season is going to be very gnarly. That Saturn Uranus square is getting tighter. It's not an easy time.
No.
But this period is, pay attention, have your conversations, take some actions on what you believe, and do something with it. Whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I just wanted to mention, just for the clarity's sake of astrology here, is that Venus will first trine Pluto in the early days of the month. That's going to happen, I think, on the 26th. So it gets this trine because it's in Virgo Earth sign. And then later at the end of the month, it goes to a square. So the trine is saying, hey, let's look at what opportunities for empowerment are there in your relationships. So it kind of sets you up for that early in the month. So it's sort of like, hey, folks, take advantage of what's available this in the beginning of the month. There's still some earth energy going on. And then you have air and these conversations we keep talking about. And then you dive into this more intense zone at the end of the month. But the good news is you have time to get ready. Right. Yeah, that
Venus trine Pluto is on September 26th. And then after that, right after Mercury goes direct, it also trines Pluto on October 6th. So Mercury, it's been retrograde, and then it turns and it starts going direct again. And it's empowering, with that trine to Pluto, there's an empowerment of your voice there on the 6th as well. And that's right before Pluto turns direct.
Nice.
Interesting.
Yeah. So really there's this kind of front loading happening in this month of with those topics. That Venus that rules Libra has a trine to Pluto, and then Mercury, who's, you know, doing this retrograde thing and is all concerned with relationships as well, to a degree. And then you have this empowerment thing. So it's pretty cool, actually. Wow. So, all right.
It's really interesting. Can I bring up something totally random that I just noticed? I just noticed as we're looking at this, you know, that Mars trining Saturn. Okay. So interesting thing is that Chiron is right at the midpoint of that. What do you make of that? Just off the top of your head, Jenny? I don't know.
Oh, Chiron's the wound. And what is the wound in our culture? And what we're seeing, it's in Aries. There's a wound around masculinity in our culture. I am not saying men. I'm saying all of us, with how we relate to the masculine and how that impacts how we relate to the feminine. And that is what is out of balance. And that is really, if you want to look at the Libra scales and you're looking at the big picture of our society, that's my take on that. This is an opportunity to work on balancing that toxic energy, because it's not good for anybody. Everybody's suffering from it.
That's really beautiful.
That's what I think.
That's really beautiful. I hadn't realized that Chiron was right there at that midpoint, sextiling both Mars and Saturn. And, you know, that Mars and Saturn, the Mars is getting ready to go retrograde. So there's just an awful lot of activity here, trying to do some work to stabilize and heal that masculine toxic energy. Okay.
But that's your inner work, you know, that's what you're bringing voice to, your inner work. Everybody has their own share of it. So, all right.
Fascinating. Very, very interesting. Okay. So now we are going to start talking about each sign and how this kind of plays out. We'll do a little piece on each sign, and you can, you know, watch the one that relates specifically your rising sign. That's the most, the one to watch first. If you don't know your rising sign, watch your sun sign. And if you don't know your sun sign, you're probably not here listening to us anyway. All right.
Yeah. All right.
So we will move to that. Okay, so we are now opening up. Oh dear, we're on Taurus. There we go. Here we go. Now, if you've got Aries rising, then Libra season highlights your 7th house. And what we've included here in these videos is we've included the opposition between the Sun and Jupiter. And so that opposition, that's okay. Tell me what your thoughts are there, Jenny.
Well, let's start a little bit with Libra. So this is highlighting your 7th house, as you mentioned, of partnerships. So there's going to be a big focus on, I don't know, cooperating with your partnerships. Those can be your romantic, your marriage, but it also can be business partners. And it also can be whoever you're sitting down with in one-on-one conversations. So for you, the opportunity is all about having these conversations in your one-on-one partnerships. And then I think the opposition, I really think, brings in the idea of, like, you've got to get kind of good with yourself. Like, you've got to be respecting your own autonomy and being clear about who you are as an Aries rising person, because it's falling in your 1st house. So with Aries rising, you have a lot of focus on the courage to lead, the courage to face things that scare you, those kinds of topics. So this is a great opportunity to become more self-aware of how you embody that sense of autonomy on a just period. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's such an interesting dynamic for people with Aries rising, having that need for diplomacy and balance in their relationship, and yet the strength of their own personality. So one of the things with an opposition is just the clarity You know, it's like a full moon. You see what you can see in an opposition. You can really see from the perspective of your, you know, the diplomatic, creating pleasure in your relationships. You can see how that reflects on the other side, the strength and the ability to take action and determine who you are as an individual at the same time. You know, that balance, that balance between self and other is going to be very important to you this month.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really well put. I mean, I just think wherever you have Aries in your chart is something that you've got to do that solo thing. You know, you've got to kind of do the daredevil solo. I'm on my own. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet. And with Aries rising, that's a big part of your whole life purpose.
Right.
So you're already, I mean, a big lesson for Aries rising people is around what you said, that mirroring in relationships that happens. And how do you find that balance of respecting yourself, yet being willing to cooperate and to compromise in a positive way in those relationships, and not just be like sort of like a dick that you could be with Aries rising, you know? So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And then just very briefly to touch on the Grand Trine that will be formed through the course of the month, really bringing a sense of flow and ease in these 3 areas of your life. So Mars is going through your 3rd house, really bringing the determination to speak up in your relationship and bringing that conversation to your community. That's where the flow of the month is.
Yeah, this is just this is that opportunity really landing in these most cooperative social scenarios. Like, so 3rd house is like going to the grocery store and chatting with the clerk who's ringing you up. You know, like maybe see your neighbor on the way. Maybe you hop on your bicycle to go down the store, you know, to the store. I mean, it's those kinds of ways that you navigate and have that opportunity to, through your daily chit chat, maybe insert a little bit more meaningful topics, ask people how they're feeling about things. That, you know, who knows, things may come about. And then that 11th house just really brings in those social relationships, like your friendships in the big circle of friends, not so much the intimate. The ideas of sisterhood or brotherhood really come through that 11th house. So your community social situations are, I don't know, you have an opportunity to help stabilize those through your voice.
That's really lovely. I mean, I just see people with Aries rising with this great opportunity to bring conversation to their partners, to their community, and really help elevate those conversations. In that elevating those conversations, the balance of the relationship and that direct Aries, there's a tendency with that Aries rising to be more aggressive, but elevating that conversation, that ability to bring balance to both your relationship and your own voice, and bringing that into your community. That's lovely.
Yeah. And once that Mercury comes back out of Virgo too, you're going to have an emphasis, that just emphasizes even more the talking in the 7th house. So
Okay. So there you have it. Those of you with Aries rising. Now we're going to move to those of you. Let's get rid of these lines. What happened here? I don't even know. Hold on one second.
Okay.
I apologize.
No problem.
For that little mess. Okay. So if you have Taurus rising, this brings Libra is in your 6th house. So as the sun moves into Libra season really highlights the 6th house, which is very much about the day-to-day routines that support your health. That support your health. So what is it that's in that area that needs to be balanced? What is it in your routines that you need to be paying attention to?
And I like to think with Libra too, that it's an air sign. So this is how you get your sort of mental perspective. You get mental space and you step back and kind of evaluate, how is my health? What's going on? How do I eat? How is my exercise routines? and take a look at that and think about places that maybe you need to enhance or increase. And one of the things you may want to think about is maybe you need to get help from other people, like get your friend to join you on the run, or, somehow bring in a more collaborative approach to your healthcare. Make it more fun, make it so that you can have that conversation. We're talking about why you're doing your workout, or, why you're cooking food. I mean, these are all 6 health topics. So I think that that's something you want to think about. And then you got to bring in that Aries over there, right? The opposition to Jupiter, which, adds more heat to the mix. I mean, which is getting sort of like insistent, I think, that you kind of reckon with your solo pursuit of whatever your spiritual path might be. That would be one way to look at it. There's other ways to look at it, but that's certainly one thing, kind of reckoning with that, so that that that's also playing into what your routines are.
Yeah, there's a balance created there. One of the things you can think about, the 12th house and the 6th house, they're both related to health. They're both related. The 6th house is very much our physical health. The 12th house can be thought of as our emotional or our mental health. So this, and the 12th house as the unconscious. So there's something to be really seen here between these two areas. With an opposition, there's the clarity of, like a full moon, there's the clarity, the illumination, where you're really able to see more clearly some of what has maybe previously been hidden, that's impacting both your mental and your emotional and physical health. So really paying attention and doing, taking some action here on what you discover, what you see in that illumination of that opposition.
Yeah, you're making me think, Laurie, about this is how you have to confront those hidden behind the scenes things that cause you suffering. So you have to have the courage, the Aries courage, to confront the things that are behind those scenes, because we all have unconsciousness, and part of our life path is to work with those unconscious traits. And that is, I think this is making a statement about that, and being brave and going, okay, I got to fold that into my regular routine practice that shows up in the Libra area of life. So yeah. That's great. I like how you said that.
Yeah. Okay. So the other piece that we wanted to just bring into the conversation here is that throughout the course of the month, we're having a grand trine being formed in the air signs. So that just, I really wanted to bring this in just because it's the area where there's a lot of flow. It's the area in your life where things are working well, where you want to be having these interesting, powerful conversations. So for you with Taurus rising, this is the 2nd house, the 6th house, and the 10th house. So what are the conversations going to be, Jenny?
Well, these 3 houses are all about your livelihood, your career, how you earn money, your daily work routines, that, how you get to work. I mean, these are the 3 houses that very much pertain to how you're going to be working with your profession, if you have one, or how you're going to be showing up in public with your social reputation. So this is going and having the conversation at work, and trusting yourself that you're a good resource for this conversation, and you have these resources with that 2nd house focus. And then just being willing to talk about maybe some challenging issues that are at work, and in the professional realm. And you have an opportunity to bring more harmony and balance to those areas, to kind of offer yourself up as a way of bringing more diplomacy to these areas. And maybe there's conflicts at work, or, it's that kind of thing that you might be wanting to think about.
Right. So if I have Taurus rising, should I ask for a raise at my job?
It might be a good time, actually. I mean,
that was what I was thinking as I'm looking at it. It's like, oh yeah, ask for a raise. It's like having the conversation about, your values, your money, your resources, how you're spending your day to day, and your job or reputation, bringing that, having those conversations more easily, and using that awareness of yourself and your own unconscious needs at the same time.
Yeah, it's cool because with Saturn up there in that 10th house, you have the possibility of helping bring some more stability and structure to your professional life, or your colleagues at work, or wherever you're showing up in the social reputation part. And then with Mars in that second house, like it's time to
Right.
be like, gosh, I'm worth a lot. I have a lot to offer, and I'm going to go ahead and say my thing. And it might take some reckoning with your self-worth a bit, but that's really what it's saying. Great opportunity for that, and making it affect your day-to-day, your routines, like how you unfold your work projects.
Right. Or on the other hand, if it's an untenable situation, this is a time for you to see that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, Saturn has been moving, for those of you with Taurus rising, Saturn's been moving through this 10th house for quite a while now. And you've been working hard. You've been learning a lot about your job, or your, how you function out there in the world. And if you're not getting what you need there, Mars is saying, okay, now's the time to take action and move things along one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, these are mental resources to apply to your job / livelihood, how you earn a living situation. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to those of you with Gemini rising, and that's going to bring Libra season. Libra is in your 5th house. So your attention, your intellectual, balancing, diplomatic attention is moving into that area of how you give of yourself, how you give love through your creativity or other ways. So that's where a lot of the attention is right now.
Yeah, and with Libra on your 5th house, you might be a person who has quite a sense of aesthetics, a creative sense of what harmony looks like, or what beauty might look like. You might have quite an opinion about that. So that's that area of life. This is also how you give of yourself, how you give unconditional love. So I always think about those projects you would do that have nothing to do with money, like that you would do no matter what. You would make happen. You don't care if you make money from it. It's just something you do because it's a labor of love. And so somehow this part of your life is being lit up, and opposite that, you have Jupiter in the 11th house in Aries. So this is something about how you kind of take a leadership position in your community, or how you are willing to kind of open your heart more to receive love from your community. And that might take considerable courage. Groups can be intense for a lot of people, right? So
and that the opposition is, it's like a full moon. It's like you have the awareness with an opposition. You can, there's an illumination of the issue. So as the sun goes into this 5th house and it's lighting up that area of where you give love, you're able to see what you need to be receiving. That polarity between the 5th and the 11th, I think is so interesting. It's, where you give love and where you receive love are in this opposite position. So this is something for you to really pay attention to this month. How courageous you can be in putting yourself on the line in order to receive back.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, just in the sense that you are being asked, if you have Gemini rising, to find your sense of autonomy and willingness to stand alone in a group. So it's kind of that whole, okay, I'm good. I'm doing what I need to do. I can feel sort of brave and autonomous in front of the group. I always just think of someone speaking in front of the group, because that's always what it kind of lends itself to. It doesn't have to be that, but it's some way in which you're really striking out alone in the group. And then with Libra on the 5th, it's this tremendous cooperative possibility for you. Like this is where you're rolling up your sleeves and joining with other people to create something as well. So it's quite an interesting juxtaposition. But I can think about people with social anxiety and that kind of thing, and having to go, gosh, I've got to stand on my own 2 feet here, and it can be quite a challenge. So.
Right. I have got to stand on my own 2 feet and show myself. Really show up. That's interesting. Okay, so then the other thing that we've got drawn on here is Mars and Saturn, just to show where during the course of this month, there's an easy flow of communication. So for those of you with Gemini rising, you've got a lot to say.
Yeah.
You've got a lot to say. You've got a lot of big opinions, and you're going to show them to the people you love, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
this is the 1st, the 5th, and the 9th. How do you think of those 3 houses as a unit?
I think of them as where you express yourself. So the 1st house is really just self, like, here we go. The 5th house is that risk taking, creative pursuits, as we were discussing. And then the 9th house is where you maybe go and travel in other lands and gain more wisdom. And then you're able to express your own critical thinking, your own philosophy, your own opinion, and share that. So really, it's pretty cool to have this air emphasis in these 3 expressive houses, because you really, what you say is of great import, and you have an opportunity to wield the power of your voice to express yourself in a unique way that can offer action, that can offer stability to other people, and that can offer a generosity really through that 5th house in the Libra season. So.
Yeah, that's nice. In looking at this trine, I like to think about, Saturn, of all these planets that were showing up here, Saturn's the one that's the slowest moving. It's been in your 9th house. Those of you with Gemini rising, it's been in your 9th house for, I don't know, a couple of years now. And you've been really learning a lot about your higher understanding of the world, whether that be through travel, education, paying attention to politics, or, whatever it is, your higher understanding, your world view. That's been a place of a lot of learning. So what you've learned right now is a point of, bringing that learning into direct action through your personality and in a creative manner.
And because Jupiter's in the 11th, your impact is going to be on groups. Those of you Gemini rising, you have a big impact here on groups. So so think about that, and I hope you act on it, because
take some action.
Here.
I think it's so important for all of us to understand that even a tiny action makes a difference. Don't stop yourself from taking action just because you only have a little bit that you feel you can offer, because even a little bit is important. Okay. Are we clear with that one?
Yeah, I think we've.
All right. So now let's move on to those of you who have Cancer rising. So for those of you with Cancer rising, Libra is in your 4th house. So this is about home and family. There's a real focus during this time of the year on home and family.
Yeah, so this is thinking about cooperation with family, which isn't always the easiest. Libra can also be arguments and that debates that you may have in your family life. And so that might be a manifestation, but really you're really seeking harmony. I mean, Libra's not really seeking to fight. It's seeking to balance and find harmony. And it comes about in different ways. As we've talked, sometimes it's through more argument, or you might find yourself being more of in a mediator role, like in your family dynamic, depending what's happening. Because anybody with Libra in the 4th house, like, you have served as a bridge one way or another amongst your family members. And that might be, from your ancient lineage and talking about that with your current relatives, or that might be between family members who fight, or it could be something about just wanting a nice, calm, quiet home space where it's not being disrupted. It's not like a job site, let's say, or so those are all kinds of things that you're going to be getting, or are going to be highlighted in this time.
And speaking of the job site, we've got the opposition brings in Jupiter in the 10th house, which is the career, the reputation, how the world sees you. So how are you thinking about that opposition? You're balancing this family, but in order to do so, there's some action that has to be taken out in the world.
Yeah, or that maybe your family life is kind of pulling you, but you need to be in your professional life. It's a vital importance that you do the Aries thing in the 10th house, right? So this is stand on your own
Right.
2 feet, be willing to be solo, be willing to do the difficult pursuit of standing on your own 2 feet and not being pulled in all these other directions. So this is kind of like setting boundaries, right? Which we're going to get to in a second because of where Saturn is. But there's something about this very important balance between your home life and your work
Home and your
life.
work life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm just having this as you're talking, I'm having this image of, you know, you're at home, you're trying to balance everything at home, and then you have to go and be really brave at work. And the
Mhm.
two really support each other. But both, yeah, it's a balancing act, as Libra season always is. And with the opposition to Jupiter and Aries, it really brings that need
Yeah.
for balance into focus.
Yeah, I agree. Because, like, it's kind of like if you're at home and you're having conflict at home, well, you're kind of squandering that energy that could be put to good use in your profession. Isn't necessarily about conflict, but about moving something forwards in a way that Aries can do like no other sign. I mean,
Right.
Aries is the accelerator. So if you're kind of in that indecisive or stuck in a zone in the family life, it might be interfering with that. So that's what we're talking about trying to right that, bring more balance and
Right.
find the calm, even keel at home, and then do the thing you need to do where you got to really dig in and find courage in your workplace.
Right. So you can go have a battle at work and then come home and, you know, calm things down at home. Yeah.
That's right.
Doing that little dance. Okay. So then the other thing that we want to pay attention to here is the grand trine that is being formed throughout the month between the three air signs. And this is showing up in your 4th house with the sun, your 8th house with Saturn, and the 12th with Mars. So what are we talking about here? I mean, this is all air signs, so it's all about communication and intellect. What are we thinking about?
Well, yeah, good question. As a system, these 3 houses are the 3 most private houses.
Yes.
They're the hardest to understand. They're the most hidden. They're most tucked away. The 4th house really refers to your lineage and where you come from. There's an ancestral component to it, and the private family life where the public's not looking at you. The 8th house is, well, quite frankly, it's all about boundaries, about how do you set boundaries with other people's values. There's this idea of shared resources, shared values that you need to grapple with. But guess what? You know, when you share those things with people, you run into trouble, you run into emotional difficulties, you run into other people's kind of hidden baggage that's kind of tucked beneath the surface, and we all have it. And so the boundary thing is about understanding more about yourself, knowing thyself, so that you can have more of a clear sense of when other people are throwing stuff at you, that you can say, nope, you know what, that's yours. We can collaborate over here, but this, you know, you have to kind of take ownership of some of that. So there's a skill around that. And then the 12th house is the one that's the most hidden from view. It refers to, among other things, how we become our own worst enemy. So this is your unconscious material that if you haven't dealt with yet, it can start controlling you. And with Mars in that 12th house, you have a really good opportunity to grapple with that stuff, to kind of bring it up. So this is about communicating really difficult stuff to others. It's a big challenge, and into your workplace, because that's where Jupiter's directing your attention.
Right.
So, woo, this is a lot.
Right. It's a lot.
It's
and it's a grand trine. So there's really an opportunity to be able to do this really difficult thing with a lot more ease than would normally typically happen. I mean, Saturn's been moving through your 8th house. If you've got Cancer rising, Saturn's been in that 8th house for a couple of years now. And so you've been really working on that, really working on understanding how to grapple with other people's baggage, other people's values that are very different than your own. So this really enables you to have those hard conversations with an understanding of how to do that, because you've been really working on that so hard. You've been really learning about boundaries. So now this is kind of, putting the rubber to the road. Like, okay, you've been really working on this. Now, how's it going to play out in the real world, in those difficult conversations with your family members about, who knows, unconscious stuff in that you've probably accumulated from your family of origin.
I know, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So there's some difficult conversations that may be had, and yet you've got the tools. You've been developing those tools.
Yeah, and with Cancer rising too, you're a person who has to deal with that kind of emotional content anyway. You're always kind of feeling, ooh, stuff's coming at me, or what's my own content, what's happening. So you kind of have that as a little bit of a skill set, and it's actually kind of nice to have these kind of challenging houses with air signs on them, because it enables you to get a bit more space. So as much as you've grappled with your own emotional content, the more you're going to be able to have a bit of space from this other stuff that's going on, and be kind of uniquely equipped to bring these challenging things to people's attention in your work life. Because again, that's where Jupiter's trying to point the energy. And you've got all of Libra season to kind of work with those Libra traits in your 4th house and in the foundation of your personality. So best of luck.
Awesome. That's great. Okay. So let's clear this and move on to those of you with Leo rising. Now, if you've got Leo rising, then Libra, the sun has moved into your 3rd house. This really brings, the highlight is on communication, on those relationships that are kind of we talk often with the 3rd house about the cashier at the grocery store, or just people that you see in your everyday life. The 3rd house also can relate to siblings, neighbors, those kind of relationships, and communication itself. So you've got an air sign there. You've got a lot of diplomatic ability anyway at your disposal. So that's where the focus of Libra season is.
Yes. The 3rd house is rather an interesting one. I've been thinking a lot about movement in the 3rd house, like how you move through your environment, your immediate environment. So I think that's a nice component. It's also how you learn. So with Libra there, you might be learning more about cooperation, about cooperative skills, about how to mediate, how to listen to 2 different points of views and find the middle ground between those 2 views.
I like that.
Oh, such an important skill, right? So useful. So you're naturally kind of adapted to that. So think about that. And then you have that opposition to Jupiter, which Laurie has very eloquently been talking about. It's really gives you this viewpoint. It's kind of like the full moon. It shows you things that you maybe couldn't see before. So this is kind of with Leo rising, you just need to stand your ground and be responsible for your own worldview, your own critical thinking, your own ability to take on board other people's viewpoints and listen and grow and expand. That's what I think of.
I like that. Yeah, with Jupiter in that 9th house of worldview, it is very much about the courage to listen, the courage to not shut down conversations. I think that's what I see in this opposition, is the courage to not just automatically shut down people who don't agree with you, which is such a challenging thing in our world today. But I think that's very much, you're learning these diplomatic skills. Well, if you're going to learn these diplomatic skills, you've got to have the courage to listen. And that's not an easy thing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well put.
Interesting, isn't it? Okay.
It is. It's important.
Yeah. So the other thing that we want to bring in here, is there anything else you want to say about that piece before?
Oh, no, let's carry on.
Okay. So it will. The next thing we want to look at is just the Grand Trine that is formed throughout the course of this month. you know, it's important for us to look at this grand trine, because this is where there's some flow and ease in our communications. And we've really got to take advantage of that right now before we go into kind of the darker side of the Scorpio season coming up. We really need to take advantage of the fact that right now there is a flow in intellect and communication. So for those of you with Leo rising, this is happening in the 3rd house, the 7th house, and the 11th. What do those 3 houses have in common, Jenny?
I mean, they're really the 3 most social houses. They're the ones that really refer to being able to connect with other people. Again, in the 3rd house, it's that the siblings and the immediate context of navigating your daily life. The 7th house refers to your partnerships, be they business partnerships or your intimate, you know, if you're married, like your marriage. Also could be your sit down session with your therapist, you know, could be any of those.
Or your astrologer.
Yeah, or your astrologer. That's right. Do sign up. And then the 11th house speaks to the kind of the bigger, the less personal picture. So this is your community. And I like to think about like the sisterhood or the brotherhood, like that it may be people you don't know at all, but you feel a sense of connection because you have something in common. You have a community focus in common. Which can come about in a lot of different ways, but that's the focus here. So you really are applying that, all the air things, its ability to communicate, its ability to take a step back and breathe and pause and get space so that you can have a perspective and then have your conversation, and also have your ears open and being willing to receive and listen. You'll notice that all 3 of these signs have kind of a duality to them. And that's part of it. It's the listening, it's the taking in and the releasing of information. It's both.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. And you know, you have to realize that if you've got Leo rising, Saturn has been moving through your 7th house for a couple of years now. And because Saturn's a pretty slow moving planet, it spends between 2.5 to 3 years going through each sign. So it's been going through there, and you've been learning a lot about how to be in partnership, who you are as a partner, whether that be, like Jenny said, a marriage partner or a business partner or whatever those intimate relationships are. So you've been learning a lot there. Now, what do you have to bring from that learning into your conversations with community, with your day-to-day routine mindset? What needs to be said? What's being expressed there? Because there's a real flow. You can have conversations right now within those realms that will move along a lot more smoothly than usual.
Yeah. I mean, this Libra season for you is really is about your communication skills, you know, and you're getting to do these in these different realms. And also with Jupiter up there in your 9th house, it's in a lot of ways, it's in the pursuit of wisdom. It's in the pursuit of opening minds and broadening the horizons for everybody. That's what you're trying to do. And being brave and say, nope, we're going to open this door. You might not like it. You might have a different opinion, but we're going to open the door because we all need to do it.
Yes.
You know,
and the minds you may think you're trying to change, it might be your own.
Right.
You know, that's the listening part. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm going to make sure people have the same worldview I do. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe you have something to see, you know, that illumination of what you believe. I don't know. There's something interesting in that.
Yeah, well, I think it's what you said earlier is like the potential for the misuse of this is pretty easy to describe. You know, you can picture the zealot, the preacher shouting their opinion and not listening to anybody. And that would be pretty easy to picture. But it doesn't. Yeah,
that's
right.
Exactly. Thank you. You said that very well. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. I think is it would be easy to misunderstand this. And think that it's all about you and your opinions and you convincing others. And well, listen.
Yeah, especially with Leo rising, right?
Right. There is that
the
tendency. Yeah. And we say that as both Leo people.
That's right. We know.
With full respect for Leo.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to those of us with Virgo rising. Libra is showing up in your second house. So this is an area where in your life you have a certain amount of diplomacy, because if you've got Virgo rising, Libra is always a part of it, is your second house. So the sun moves in there, bringing its light and warmth to your area of resources, self-worth, even money issues. Okay, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think with Libra here on your second house, that you have one of your big resources is what you just said, diplomacy, and understanding how to cooperate. Like you naturally, innately have that as one of your very important resources. I think, bringing balance to this area of life. So that might be bringing balance to money, your checkbook. I know that's an outdated term, but it's still valid. But it might be something about that, like really working with that, because Venus also does rule money. And so it might be, and with Libra there, money could be a big focus, but the deeper level of money is always self-worth, because money itself is neutral. It becomes not neutral when you bring stuff to it, and human beings tend to do that. So the deeper layer is having some balance around your self-worth, having a point of view, like maybe taking a step back, checking in. Am I valuing myself enough? Am I happy with how I'm incorporating those values into my livelihood? Because that's going to be a question that might come about. So that's what I think of with Libra there.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at with that is the opposition to Jupiter. So an opposition is always, the way I think of it is it's, you can see both sides. It's an illumination. It's sort of like a full moon. You see the other side. So with that opposition, this is between my values and other people's values. So yeah, let me think that one.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting having Aries in that 8th house, right? Because what it's really saying is this is a place that you need to be autonomous. You need to take responsibility for your self-understanding, so that you understand your own deeper emotional content, so that when you're in these challenging situations with other people, you're pretty clear. Nope, this is me. This is where I'm at. This is what the other person's bringing in, so that you can have a worthwhile conversation. You can have a worthwhile navigation through that, and not get pulled into anger at like, gosh, you're such a jerk because you're really making me mad, which is fine. Sometimes it happens, but just wanting to understand, like getting to the core of the issue there, so that you can work together, because really with the shared resources of the 8th house, you're really coming together to grapple with difficult issues, right? That's really what you want. Right. It's hard to do.
Right. Yeah, there's something in that about the courage to set the boundaries that need to be set for you, to hold steady with your own values. There's something in there as well. There's something that you might see where you haven't set the boundaries that need to be set.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. Because it is hard to set those boundaries. And if you don't, it just gets messy. And then you're giving away power. And so now you're in the more negative manifestation of Libra, where you're getting, you might be struggling with codependence, or you might be struggling with indecision. And so you got to access that Aries stuff. Like you just said, have the courage to set boundaries. That's really great.
Yeah, that's, I think that's really important. That 8th house, it's about grappling with other people's baggage. And the most important thing in that is developing and being clear about your own boundaries. So yeah, that opposition is very, very potent there. Okay, I think enough said on that. The other thing we want to think about is the fact that throughout the course of this month, we have this grand trine being formed between the air signs. So we've got Mars up there ready to take action in the career. We've got Saturn in here trying to structure the realm of the routines, and then the focus there on the personal values. So yeah, what are those three houses? How do you think of the connection between those three?
I think these three houses are a lot about how you kind of work with reality, the reality of having
Huh.
to make money, the reality of having a work
Ah,
life, the
I like
reality of
that.
showing up in public and having a profession, perhaps. I know not
Wow.
everybody does, but you're
Huh.
really working with these tangible things. And that's why, even though you might be talking about self-worth in the second house, you're really working with values and potentially money, and it's how you're earning that money. So there's that component to it. And then the sixth house is the routines, the getting up and going to work, the other things that support that work, like do you pack a healthy lunch, do you get an exercise break, and those sorts of things. And with Saturn going through there, you've been learning about those routines for a while. And then
Right.
your 10th house is more typically known as like your social reputation or your profession. So that's what you're working with. And with air signs there, like you're bringing the conversation to that particular part of life. So,
Right.
mhm.
Huh. It's
Yeah,
interesting just thinking about Saturn moving through that sixth house. Yeah, you've been learning for a couple of years now. You've been really working on understanding how those routines impact you and support your health. You may be dealing with some health issues even. So there's some way that plays into this conversation. So there's a flow of conversation, your values, your routines, your
mhm.
career.
Yeah, and with it being Libra season, that sun is going to progress, degree by degree through that second house. So this is a great, really good opportunity to just take a look at how do you treat yourself? How's your self-esteem? Are you being good to yourself? Are you able to really, like, what's your level of self-love? Which is kind of a tough question, but it's important, very important, and it's a hard path. It's hard to love ourselves. I think we've all probably bumped into things like that. So at its core, this is what this season's about for you, and every
Yeah.
Libra season really is working with that self-love piece,
Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
challenge. So
And in order to do it, you've got to set your boundaries.
that's
So
right.
do that this month. Okay.
Yep.
I think that clears us up for those of you with Virgo rising. And now we're going to
Great.
move on to those of you with Libra rising.
That's
Okay.
right.
This puts Libra season right in your first house. This is very, very personal to you. This is, it's very personal. What are you going to say about that, Jenny?
Well, this is interesting because I do think Libra refers to that cooperative component, and opposed to Aries, you're really working with the autonomy. So this is autonomy and cooperation. This is how your personal one-on-one relationships mirror you. There's a real back and forth between these two. So if you have Libra rising, topics of your most intimate personal relationships may be coming about, or your business partnerships, anywhere where you have a really one-on-one relationship that has a big concern of equity to it, of having some sort of, or equanimity, a balance to it. So that's what you're going to be working with. And I don't know, I think about the first house, it's considered the most powerful house out of the 12, because it's where you live. So it's where you kind of bring all your energy to it. So it's topics of self-awareness, self-development. Where do you need to develop a bit more? You may be wondering about your self-image, especially with Libra there. How do I appear to other people? Do they like me? There's those kind of topics that may be coming up.
Right.
So
with that opposition, the clarity of an opposition, like a full moon, it really brings this illumination. So you see yourself so clearly in that mirroring that, there's an element here with Aries on that line of the courage to be in relationship.
yeah, absolutely. I think that is so important what you just said, because I think there's a mistake people make where they think they have to kind of dissolve into the relationship, and this is absolutely not. This is where you need to say, I'm independent, I'm autonomous, and I love you, if that's what we're talking about, a marriage, let's say. And I need to do this for me. And that when you're able to do that, you show up as a good partner. You show up as a partner who's taking responsibility for your end of things and having the courage to do that. And that's what I see with this. And Libra rising, it's hard because you want it to be all harmonious, and yet you
Right.
have Aries in the 7th house.
Yeah, and I see so much in clients with Libra rising, how often you see that they are in relationship with a super Aries type person, and that trying to maintain, their own autonomy in the face of that. But it's such a learning, that courage of strength in relationship and keeping the self balanced and harmonious. It's a very interesting combination there. Okay, so the next thing we want to think about for this Libra season is this grand trine that is formed throughout the course of the month between Libra and Gemini and Saturn. So this falls for you with Libra rising, this falls in the 1st house, the 5th house, and the 9th house. What do those houses have in common?
Gosh, I think this is where you really express yourself. This is where you're really this is the self and how you show up. And then the 5th house is your creative pursuits and how you show generosity and how you show love, and also how you are, playful, except that's tricky with Saturn in there, right?
Right.
But it's something about setting boundaries. Nope, I'm going to go out and have some fun, and then that 9th house is your mindset, or, well, your worldview, I'd say, a little broader than your mindset, like how you want to think critically about the world, your philosophy, and your willingness to take on board other people's views, and other people, like foreigners from foreign lands, and being open to that and broadening your mind instead of shutting down. So that's what I think about these houses. You really are putting yourself out in the world with all 3 of these houses.
Yeah. So there's a flow between these 3 areas of your life. And over the last few years, Saturn has been moving through your 5th house. So you've been learning a lot about how you give of yourself, and how to be creative, how to express your creativity in the world. And right now with that trine, it's very supported, and it's supported in bringing that understanding of your own creativity out into the world, and having the conversations about your worldview.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I'm thinking about, just bringing some intellectual creativity out into the world.
Yeah, that's kind of like a right-brained skill thing. It's not like dry left brain. It's right brain, creative, expansion, and being able to bring. It's pretty cool that this air sign's here, I think.
Yeah.
Talk about it and express it in this cool way, right?
Right. Yeah. When we talk about creativity, we so often in our minds go right into, earth sign type stuff, like creating something or painting a picture, a piece of art. But this is an intellectual creativity that you've been really working. I mean, for those with Libra rising, creativity isn't intellectual. It's an intellectual thing.
Yeah. And with Aquarius there, it's so inventive. So you really do have a gift to offer something different, a different viewpoint out. You really have that opportunity to do that, and really just express it through yourself by you taking action in your life and living it. Like you're really living it and showing other people how to do it. It isn't just like you're not just talking about it. You're doing it by taking action. And that's what we're really looking at.
It's funny. It's funny as we're thinking about this, all I can think of is I just saw Bread and Puppet here, and nice. Bread and Puppet is such a creative thing. I don't know if you have any idea, those of you listening, what I'm talking about, but it's a troupe of people, and they're doing this they're going all across the country right now, and their stuff is very political and very wildly creative. And I just see that, working on this creativity, bringing the worldview and the self. The other way you can think of this is somebody with a, marching with a big picket sign. This is a real creative, intellectual, bringing your opinions out into the world, and hopefully you've got a partner with you while you do it.
Yeah, because it's not it's interesting, because we've been talking a lot about how the other half of the air signs is listening And, you know, I guess as Libra rising, like hopefully you are enjoying discourse and that you have cultivated some of your listening skills, because discourse is not a monologue, it's a dialogue.
Yes.
And so there's a give and take. And I could see how there might be a tad bit of challenge here expressing yourself and just being like, this is my viewpoint. But really it's, you know, taking in is so important. And really actually maybe it's just responding to what's happening in the world around you, because bread and puppet, I mean, that's political satire. So they're responding to what's happening right now in the United States and bringing it out through this truth, like it's puppets, but you're right, it's done in this huge dramatic way. And if anyone's interested, you definitely check it out, because it's cool. And it's fascinating. I mean, I don't know what your politics are, but you will find out what theirs are soon enough. So, but it's really important work, like, and to be able to express creatively. I really like that you brought that in. And those of you Libra rising, some of this action is going to take place in your one-on-one relationships. That's what's going to happen. So,
So there you have it. Play in that creative, bring your stuff out into the world, and listen. Absolutely. So let's clear that. And we are going to, hold on a minute. Okay, so now we are moving to those of you with Scorpio rising. If you've got Scorpio rising, this place is Libra. Libra season is shining a light on your 12th house. The 12th house is, you know, it's the most hidden area in the chart. It's really your unconscious, what is below the surface. The old time astrologers called it the dust bin. I always love thinking about that. You know, where you sweep everything under the carpet. So this really brings your attention to an area that you don't often pay attention to.
It's interesting with Scorpio rising, because it's just a sort of saying, you know, this place where you need to really work with cooperation is happening really far behind the scenes, you know, in this kind of house that we often have to contend with isolation. So there's kind of a funny, I mean, it's easy for me to interpret this as like sort of a spiritual focus, like the idea of kind of finding the flow of whatever you want to call it, spirit or whatever, like the flow of things, and kind of having a relationship with that, like that trust in the bigger processes of life, like somehow things are going to work out, you know. And it's an interesting placement. Maybe it's helpful to Scorpio rising, just because Scorpio is always like looking deep down underneath the rocks or under the hood, or trying to get to the bottom of issues. And perhaps having Libra in that 12th house is actually kind of helpful, because Libra gives you a little bit of space and you can like breathe, you know. And
I like thinking about that, how that works with the Scorpio. The intensity of Scorpio, and yet the most intense deep house has the ease of the diplomacy of Libra. That's an interesting way to think about it.
Oh, right. Because it's 12th house is like, there's so much to it. I mean, it's that underworld adventure. It's the, you know, to find out what's going on under there. It's isolation, retreat from society. There's so many different things. And so having that kind of chatty sign there, I just think it adds to the Scorpio thing of, you have this great ability to talk about these difficult things and bring them to the light and go, hey folks, we all have this, we need to cooperate around these issues. Like that is quite a powerful skill these days.
That's interesting to think about it that way. Okay, so with that sun this month, this season, Libra season, opposing Jupiter in the 6th house. So, you know, if you think about, an opposition is always sort of like a full moon. It's the illumination. You can really see something clearly here. So what is where the clarity is between that hidden underworldly area of you and your daily routine. So really being able to see how they work together, how your routines support your ability to look in those internal areas.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and I think about with Scorpio rising, because you have Aries on the sixth house here, I just think this is a place where you've got to kind of, I don't know, burn off some energy. Like there's some heat there, and it's something you need to do alone. So I always think that this is a good setup for solo sports like mountain biking or even rock climbing, which isn't necessarily totally
Absolutely.
solo, but yeah, something where you're like, okay, I need to get in touch with my physicality and my inner fire, and I need to do it by myself. So I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting though, thinking about the polarity. Maybe this is a time when normally you do it by yourself, but now you're going to do an adversarial sport like tennis, you know, or ping pong, where you're going to have an opponent. Maybe that's a good way to kind of wrangle with this energy during Libra season. Listen, be a bit competitive, we'll say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The courage, you know, with that Jupiter in Aries, there's just this big need to be courageous in taking some action on that physical level, that day-to-day routine, and really seeing how that supports your understanding of yourself on a deep inner level.
Yeah. And that also makes me think of, I know you and we talk about the 12th house a bit as like suffering, and kind of having to realize that all human beings suffer, and there's a universality to that. But it just gives you this opportunity to work with that in a little bit different way, like that we're always talking about cultivating compassion, like in that 12th house. But I just think it's really important for Scorpio rising people to make sure they have a somewhat of a vigorous routine here to work with the heat, because you've got Mars ruling your ascendant and this Aries house. And so with Jupiter coming into this for this month, like it's time to expand that notion of how you're doing these routines and working with your health.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. Okay, so the other thing that we want to talk about here, for those of you with Scorpio rising, we're looking at the Grand Trine that is formed throughout the course of this Libra season in the air signs. So for you, this is in your 4th house, your 8th house, and your 12th house. Those are 3 of the most personal, deep areas of who you are. The home, other people's values, and again, that kind of hidden area of your unconscious. How do you think about that? You know, I'll let you say something.
Oh yeah. Well, no, just to add on what you're already painting a picture. I mean, these are the 3 most private and difficult to understand places in the chart. They're really ones that aren't very easily understood. Out of the 3 of them, the 4th house is an angular house, so there's a bit more power to that one. So sort of drawing on this idea of your family origins, perhaps your ancestry, your lineage, does present the idea of a platform which you can kind of grow and evolve and sort of obtain some more personal power, I guess I'd say. But once you get to that 8th and the 12th house, you really are talking about very hidden houses. Like the 8th house refers to a bunch of things, but one of them is secrets. Another one is like the need to kind of develop boundaries around, might be around some of those secrets. But I think about skeletons in the closet with the 8th house. Among many other things, right?
Especially when it's combined with the 12th and the 4th. There's definitely, you know, one of the ways that I would think about this is, you know, a Grand Trine creates a flow and an ease, and it's air signs, it's conversations. There's things that can be talked about at this period of time that otherwise it would be more difficult. But this does allow some ease to maybe talk about some of those skeletons in the family closet. Exactly. You know, having the, you know, you've got Mars going through that 8th house. You might, it may be a time when these conversations come up.
Yeah. And you have to confront it. There's something about Mars being there that brings it visible. And same with, and Saturn in the 4th house is also suggesting of something stable emerging out of the watery mist, you know, that you kind of go, oh, like that's not deniable anymore. So it really is an opportunity to talk about something that usually is submerged and now is kind of floating up to the surface. And you're like, oh, And
Yeah.
so that's the opportunity, right? I
Yeah.
think.
Saturn's been moving through that
Yeah.
4th house for a couple of years now. And you've been learning. You know, you've been facing reality. You've been learning to be
Mhm.
responsible around these issues around family and home, perhaps, most likely. You know, there's stuff that's been going on there. And now there
Mhm.
is an opportunity to really open those gates a little bit and have some conversation. That might not be
Mhm.
easy, but it'll be
Yeah.
easier now than other times. And, you know, if you try to prevent it, you know, one of the things with a trine is it's a gift.
Mhm.
It's not an opportunity. The sextiles are opportunities. The
Mhm.
trines are gifts, whether you
Mhm.
want them or not. They're kind of, there they are.
Right. Yeah.
You might try to resist these conversations. They might come in anyway.
Yeah. And yeah, that's really, I like how you said it's a gift, because we have been talking about, I mean, it is something that comes to you. And in this case, it might be something because of the 12th house focus that's going to help with your mental health, releasing something that has been problematic, that is affecting your mental health when you think of the 12th house that way. So it's time to talk about these challenging things. And when things get overwhelming, you just go over to that Jupiter, you go do
Exactly.
your expansive
Exactly.
routine, whatever it is that helps you
Yes.
burn off heat. Maybe it's
Yes.
could even be going to the spa and getting in the hot tub. You know, I mean, there's there's different ways that you could work
Right.
with it, but
Yeah.
certainly making
Oh,
sure
it's
you're doing
interesting.
that and taking being on your own 2 feet in that area of your health. So great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Okay.
good luck to all of you. And we're going to move now on to those of you with Sagittarius rising. And if you've got Sagittarius rising, this puts Libra season right into your 11th house. The sun moves in there and light and warmth follow. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of attention at this point in time around the community that supports you to your desires. That's how I think about the 11th house.
Mm.
What do you have to say about that, Jenny?
This is a good time. This Libra season is time for you to think about the idea of cooperation with groups. I
Yeah.
mean, really in a simple term, but it can be groups of friends, but it's a little less personal than those super close friends. I like to think of it as your well, community, but also the idea of a sisterhood, you know, that people, or brotherhood, that people you don't know at all, but you
Right.
know you have common ground with. So it's a bigger house. It's above that horizon line. So we're looking at a little bit bigger topics than just you and you and your small group. This
Right.
is broader than that.
Yeah.
So it's all of those things. And then when you bring in that opposition to Jupiter, then you're being asked to really be autonomous in your 5th house, to stand on your own 2 feet in the 5th house of creative pursuits of this also refers to children. This refers to how you give of love unconditionally without any strings at all.
Yeah.
So this is a time to be fierce and brave in that area of life. And it does involve some risk taking, right? With the 5th house
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. Well, it's the courage to take some sort of action in your creativity that reflects out into the community. You know, that opposition between the 5th and the 11th is one of my favorite polarities. It's so interesting. The 5th being how we give love, and the 11th where we receive love. So there's some way in which the determination to be courageous in how you give of yourself brings that learning of cooperation in community.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I always just think the way you've talked about it, it's just a flow of energy. Like as you give, as you do your thing, then you're able to just be more open to receiving. Like it's a
Right.
two-way street. So
Right. Right.
nice.
So do your
Okay.
creative projects and, bring them to your community.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
So the next thing we want to bring in is the Grand Trine that occurs throughout the course of the month between the house of Libra and Saturn in Aquarius and Mars in Gemini. So this Grand Trine is really, it's just a statement of a flow of intellect, a flow of conversation. And this is between the 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th. What do those 3 houses have in common?
Oh, I mean, they're really the social intellectual houses, aren't they? I mean, they really have it. This is where you're going to go and connect with people on an intellectual level, share ideas, have a conversation, listen to their ideas, and just kind of be in that flow of like, okay, then how does that fold into my creative pursuits? I mean, that's what you're doing. With the Aquarius in the 3rd house, you're very inventive in just your communication in general, like that you have the ability to really think outside the box, how to get through to people. And with Saturn there, you're stabilizing that whole skill set. And then you can't help it. You've got to look at your one-on-one partnerships. Again, this could be your marriage, your intimate partnerships, but it also might be business associates or people like that, that anyone you have a really intense like back and forth with on a common topic. So with Mars going through that house, it's going to, some kind of action to do with those partnerships is going to be part of the conversation. And then it's all going to impact your community. So that's what's going on. And the place to really make sure you're taking fierce action is going to be in your 5th house of creativity. Yeah.
I think about, Saturn's been moving through your 3rd house for a couple of years now. You're learning a lot about how you communicate. You're learning a lot about that innovative communication skills. And this really provides an opportunity to bring that learning into your relationships and into your community and to make a difference there.
Yeah.
The trines are gifts. It's a lot of energy that is flowing in those 3 areas.
Yeah, and there's with Mars in your 7th house too, there's some spice. So I was just think about if it is your marriage partner or your other, anybody that is an intimate partner, that's pretty spicy. So take advantage.
Oh, that could bring all kinds of conversation in.
That's right.
We'll let that one sit for now.
Yeah. We'll let you sit with that. Those of you with Sagittarius rising.
Right, exactly. Okay, so now we're going to move right on to those of you with Capricorn rising. If you have Capricorn rising, you've got Libra in your 10th house. So Libra season brings the sun into that area. The light and warmth of the sun is really, warming up and lighting up the area of career, reputation, vocation, how you are seen in the outer world.
Yes, it's shining a light on your professional life. If you, whatever you're doing for career or how you show up. It could also be, of course, parenting. I mean, there's a number of ways, but it really is that, what are you doing with the bulk of your daytime life? How are you showing up at high noon? So that's kind of, you have an opportunity like it for this month to really be focused in that area of your life, which requires having a considerable amount of autonomy in your home life, in order to just have that. It might be that you need alone time in order to cope with the more cooperative aspects of what you're doing in the workplace. So that's kind of what's happening here. But Jupiter and Aries in the 4th house, it's definitely something about your roots, something about how you need to have courage and stand tall on your own roots.
And the opposition always, like a full moon, it illuminates something in that area. So just to think about that polarity of who you are out in the world and who you are at home. This makes me think of someone who has that ability to go out in the world and be so diplomatic and make everything look good. And they come home and there's just a lot more, there needs to be some courage. There needs to be some courage expressed in the family.
See, this reminds me, I can think of a person who has this that I know, and their job is very much about building collaboration in the workplace and cooperation and big picture things, impacting urban areas, and what does this person do at home? They live alone, doing their own thing, very independent,
They
able
probably
to
have
just really enjoy it.
they probably have their own personal gym at home too, where they can lift
Right.
weights and
Yeah.
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 Aries
Interesting.
is a pretty solitary sign in a lot
Mhm.
of ways. It likes to do things on its own.
Yeah. It's kind of fundamental in that way, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It really
Yeah.
is. So that's
Well,
that opposition. And then the
mhm.
other thing we want to take a look at for this month is the grand trine that is formed throughout the course of the month between the three air signs. So we've got Saturn in the second, Mars in the sixth, and of course, the sun moving through the 10th.
Mhm.
What do these three houses have in common?
Well, these really refer to the tangible livelihood, the way you're making your way in the world. It's very like earthy, tangible, something you're grappling with. The second house is your resources, your values, how you deeply feel about yourself, your own self worth. It can refer to money on the more sort of
Mhm.
superficial level. The sixth house is that day-to-day schedule, like, oh, I get up, I go to work, I pack my lunch and get time for exercise in the middle of the day, and all those things, how they fit together, those routines and practices. And then the 10th house, that we've already discussed, really refers to that profession, the way that you show up in the most public way, in whatever your world is. So that's what we're looking at, those three houses. And with air here, it's you might be someone using your intellect to make your way in the world.
Yeah.
And this Libra season is bringing the idea of bringing more conversation to
Right.
these places.
Right.
This is talking well around the water cooler, right?
Right.
Bringing
Exactly.
politics up at the water cooler.
Yeah,
Like,
there's
uh-huh.
things that have to be talked about. A grand trine just creates this sense of flow and ease in this area. Saturn's been moving through your second house for a couple of years now. You've been really learning a great deal about your own self-worth, whether that be through, challenges around money or resources in some way, or facing reality, or being really accountable and responsible around your own self-worth and your own issues around that. So you've been learning a lot about that, and right now that knowledge really informs the conversations that are going on in this trine. um, Things that have to be said, that have to be brought to out into the world and through the
Mm-hmm.
water cooler. Through the
That's
water
right.
cooler.
I know. I was also thinking too, if you with Capricorn rising, you've got Mars going through your sixth house in this period. And so this is a good time to maybe pick up a new thing. I was thinking about going ahead and
Yeah.
having an adversary in your exercise life. So maybe you've never tried squash before, and you pick up something like that where you're having a more back and forth with another person, because it really gives you
Pickleball.
information. Yeah, oh, pickleball, totally, which can be team too. No, I mean, it's true, but it's a way to, yeah, you're having fun and burning off steam, but you're also learning how to work with people, how to both compete yet cooperate, right? You're doing both of those things at once. And that is a very important skill. And I think is one of the values of sports. It's not just, it is your health care as well, but just learning how to work with other people in these different ways,
And
Right.
how those three work together at this time. What you're learning there through that playing pickleball, to be able to bring that to the career, which brings that to your self-worth and your paycheck. This is a grand trine is just such a beautiful configuration, and it's really important to pay attention. Well, I don't know if it's important to pay attention to, because it's a gift. It's not something you have to do a lot about, but notice it. Notice it.
Yeah.
Notice how those things are supporting each other, and enjoy that support while you're doing the balancing here between home and career.
Great.
All right.
I
Are
think
we
that's
all
good.
set on that?
Yeah, I think we've covered the topics.
Okay, so now we are going to move on to those of you who have Aquarius rising. This brings Libra, this brings the sun into the ninth house, bringing the light and warmth into the area of your life that is your worldview. In the
Mhm.
simplest way, I think of that ninth house as your worldview.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, the ninth house is cool. I think it's kind of where you go and you learn the broader skills of critical thinking, where you make your own opinion about based on all of the inputs, the things that you've learned, the education you've had, the people you've encountered, and folding that into what ultimately becomes the expression of your wisdom.
mm,
So, and with Libra
absolutely.
there, it's your cooperation has a big value for you. And
Mm,
the idea of having some sort of harmony and really having the ability to see the bigger picture through the eyes of kind of this social balance, which is really a nice, it's kind of like having Lady Justice up there giving you some education about how to be in the world, right?
yeah, yeah,
But,
that is really
yeah.
nice.
Mm,
That it's
mm,
interesting, the innovation of the Aquarius rising and then
mm.
having that Libra balance in the worldview. That's really a beautiful combination.
Yeah, it's
And
like
then
fair
we've
minded.
yeah, yeah, and then we've got that opposition to Jupiter. And an opposition is, there's a clarity in an opposition because it's like a full moon. You've got that illumination between the two. So you're up here developing and working on and looking at that worldview, the balance that you have there. And yet down here in this area of communication, you've got to be brave enough to say what needs to be said.
Yeah. I kind of think of this as like a no bullshit placement. Like you're just like, no,
Nice.
I'm not sorry. No, like I'm not going to take that kind of crap. Here's what is happening, and being fierce and defending really yourself in a way. But to say what you just said, Laurie, what needs to be said. Like, because as Aquarius rising, you have this great innovative view. You have a different view than most
Yeah.
people. You don't fit into the social norms.
Right.
So you have something really important to say. And this is the courage to go, yep, you know what? I do. And I'm going to go ahead and say that.
Yeah.
I think I really like that about Aquarius rising. I've been
Yeah.
thinking a lot about
Eh,
that with Aries there.
It's really interesting because, yeah, with Libra up here, it's like you've got your worldview, but it might not be easy to really be direct about it because you're
Mhm.
trying to keep everybody pleased. But that Jupiter is saying, no, here's the clarity here. You have to say what needs to be said. You have to be brave enough to
Mhm.
speak what you see.
Yeah, this is a
That's,
little bit of a walk your talk placement.
yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
Very, very good
yeah,
way to think about it. And
yeah.
then the other thing that we're looking at with these today is the Grand Trine that is formed throughout the course of the month between that Libra as the sun moves through there and Saturn in Aquarius and Mars in Gemini. So Saturn is in your first house, Mars in the fifth, and then the Libra, of course, in the ninth. So
Hmm.
what do these three houses have in common, and how is this
Hmm.
flow going to work out?
Yeah, I think the key word maybe for these three houses is expression. This is where you kind of put out your expression of how you deal with things, as these are very active houses. So the first house is just yourself, how you are. And with Aquarius rising and Saturn going through that first house, you've had some great learning, perhaps about personal stability and boundaries. With Saturn there, confers those things. The fifth house is a bit more about, we always just talk about it as like the giving of love, the unconditional giving of love. So this can be your creative things that you're doing. Like, yes, it can be art projects and things like that, but not necessarily just that. This is a very creative way of speaking that you
Yeah,
might
yeah,
have with the
yeah.
Aquarius rising. So your art may be your voice and maybe how you put concepts
Yes.
together and talk and share with other
Yeah.
people and unify with other people through ideas. And then that ninth house, as we've talked about, is kind of that place where you've, I don't know, worked out your philosophy and now you're willing to share it with other people and work with that. So it's really nice having the air signs in these houses
Yeah,
because
I
it's
like this.
like it's outward, but it's a bit more even keeled than say a fire sign, where it's going to put things out there, but hopefully also listen, because that's what you're going to be cultivating with air signs. If you're Aquarius rising, you've probably kind of figured that out, that
Yeah.
listening is an important piece.
Yeah.
To that.
Yeah, I really like this combination. Just thinking about Saturn having, Saturn's been moving through that first house for a couple of years now, and you really are learning to take responsibility for how you show up on a very personal level. So you're taking that responsibility. You're speaking in an eloquent way about that innovation that you're learning and bringing your worldview into conversations. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, this is a powerful. I like this combination. Those of
Yeah.
you with Aquarius rising have a lot to say, and you have the ability to say it very eloquently, I think, right now.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so, yeah. And
Yeah.
the thing to remember with the trines is it's a gift. It's there. You're going to
Yeah.
find yourself in these conversations. Pay attention to them. Don't try to stop them. Pay attention to them. Listen to what you're saying and listen to the responses
Yeah.
from others as well.
And so you have, as
Yeah.
you're saying, Lori, it's like you have a lot to offer with Aquarius rising, because the Saturn moving through Aquarius this time, like you're having to restructure some of the things that you're doing. And as you're doing that, you can offer what you've learned to other people. And the Aries component here with Jupiter and Aries is just simply saying like, hey, stand your ground, get clear about how you want to be, just with yourself in how you deal with your day-to-day habits and so on in life. And that's the more personal piece, because then you can do that big expansive sharing of ideas, because you've kind of taken responsibility for that. So
That's
yeah.
great. That's great. Okay.
Cool.
Good luck, all of you. And
Mm-hmm.
now we are going to move on to those with Pisces rising. So if you have Pisces rising, Libra season brings the sun, the light, and the warmth of the sun into your 8th house.
Mm-hmm.
That's an intense house. Okay. So that's where you have Libra. What do you want to say about that, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean the eighth house is kind of like the house. Well, actually, let's think of it this way. It's kind of like the iceberg. You see the little tip of the iceberg, and that's where you meet people. You're like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. And then there's all this stuff underneath. And at a certain point in every relationship, you start to bump into all the stuff that's underneath. And it's how our relationships get deep and profound, and it's how they have meaning. It brings tremendous meaning. But it requires a considerable grappling with your own stuff, so that you kind of understand more about yourself and where you kind of end and where other people begin.
Yeah.
Because the key skill, as we always talk about here, is those boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's not boundaries against other people. It's more like, here's where this kind of slightly movable boundaries, they're not solid, where they kind of land between the two of us. Because really what you want to learn to do is cooperate, right? Because you've got Libra here. So you need to work with that less tangible stuff so you can come out the other side and get some really important work done. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Right. That's great. Okay. And the opposition to Aries, Jupiter being there in Aries in your 2nd house, that polarity of houses is interesting. This being other people's values and shared values and resources, and then the 2nd house being your own personal resources and values. So that's an interesting to think about, the need to be courageous in really showing up for your own boundaries. It's not all about that cooperation. You've got to really find a balance here. An opposition really gives you the awareness of the other side, the illumination, like a full moon. You see where you're trying to, you're doing that balance thing around other people's values and resources. And you have to really be courageous and clear about your own.
Yeah. I mean, really, the Aries part of this with Jupiter and Aries, this is how you grapple with your relationship to yourself, how you value yourself, and you say, okay, I'm going to be fierce and face, maybe it's a lot of us have low self-esteem. So having to face that and get more to the bottom of it and get kind of fierce about it, be like, nope, I am going to be bold and brave here, because the more you can do that, the easier it's going to be to navigate that 8th house. And you don't have to be a jerk about it. It's just being, you just get
Being
to
clear.
really be yourself. Yeah. You said clear. Another word you used earlier was direct. And that is, yes, we want to be direct with how we are working with those things. So it's, in a way, it's kind of simple. It's like, value yourself so you can deal with everyone else's stuff.
Absolutely. It is,
right?
It is that simple. That's beautiful. I love that. Okay. So the next thing, the other thing we want to talk about here is, throughout the course of Libra season, we have a grand trine being formed in the air signs. So we've got, like we've been talking about, we've got Libra here in the 8th house. Saturn is moving through the 12th, Mars through the 4th. So these are the most personal, kind of deep inner houses. So there's, you've got air in these houses. So there's a real intellectual basis in these deep places for you. Huh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are like the most, we've been talking about these, the most private and hidden and hard to explain places.
Yeah.
These are the places that you don't go to the party and you talk about these places, because they're really hard to discuss. I know you personally are going to Pisces rising, but this is because you have a gift. I mean, really, with Pisces rising, you're familiar with this energy. You have, it's Pisces is a very deep watery sign. It's the ocean, so part of your path is very much about bringing this sort of idealistic, dreamy possibilities to other people, and with air signs in these challenging houses, you've got some space, you've got a good viewpoint, you can step back away, you can take a look, you can kind of evaluate, and a lot of people don't have that ability in these really difficult places. So you really have a lot to offer, right? Yeah, that's what I think about.
Yeah, and a grand trine it provides a free flow of energy. The trines are gifts. We don't really have to do anything for them. So there's some, I think about Saturn's been moving through your 12th house for a couple of years now. You've been really learning a lot about your inner nature. And something in your learning is opening up the ability to have these really deep conversations with family, at home in this area, and on those really deep topics where we bump into other people's values. So pay attention to these really deep topics that come up over the course of the month, and really engage them.
Yeah, because you really can encourage people to take action, which is what we're kind of focusing on here, is what kind of actions you need to take, because you have this lovely opportunity before things go a little bit awry next month. So, so this is a great opportunity. And again, with that Saturn in the 12th house, you have the ability to kind of stabilize I don't know, people's viewpoints about some hard topics. Like you can be a little bit more of an anchor to people and supportive. And with Mars in the 4th house, you've got a little more impetus to confront something in the home life or to do with your family that is necessary. That's part of this conversation. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I think we have come to the end of the 12 signs.
Yay.
We did it. Okay, Jenny. Let's just wrap this up by saying thank you to anybody that's left listening to us. And we will do it again.
Sounds great. Thank you, Laurie. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.